Hello and welcome to this advanced folder Fanatic tutorial. I'm just going to open up and we'll go straight to preferences and then into settings, which is in the advanced section, just talking about protected folders. So I'm not going to talk about this one other than the fact that this is global. Essentially, if you have something in here enabled, it will always protect that folder, but it works in exactly the same way as the preset protection. And I'm just going to use that to talk about it because there's a bit more to go over. So I'm going to enable the per preset protection folders, and then I'm going to go back to the preset editor, and you'll see its layout has changed. We now have this bottom section, and I'll just go back, switch it off, normal, enabled. This is a After Effects project, which I've imported into this project, and we're just going to pretend that we want to keep it organized. So to do so, easy as anything, we can just click on this button here and we will see all of the folders in the comp. And I'm just going to select the pencil AEP from that list. You can type it in here as well, but I'm just going to select that. And now it is protected. So if I save this folder Fanatic and then run it, it will create the folder structure that we can see here. You can see the pencil AEP is protected. And the basics of it, you can get a little bit more advanced with it. You have these two little icons down here. And essentially, if I switch both of these off, they will be on by default. This will only save the folder. It won't save any of the assets inside it. That will all now be organized into whatever is the appropriate folder. So this is literally just saving the folder. If I enable this, this will save the folder and any of its main assets. So that's the assets within that folder itself. If I switch that off, this will now save the folder and the folders which are within its hierarchy, but no assets. And if I switch them both on, we have what it defaults to, which is it will save the folder hierarchy within it, and then all the assets both within itself and that hierarchy. And that's folder protection. So I'm just going to switch that off so there's a little bit more room. And actually, I'm going to switch that back on and remove this and then save that and then switch it off. So let's start talking about the more advanced rule sets. We already know the basics. If I click up here, the folder Fanatic runs on the basics of most things, although it doesn't have a 3D assets folder. But you can see these are the basics. Anything that falls into these categories will get filtered into these folders. We can then make them more advanced by adding in another folder. So for example, in here, I'm going to build another top level, and I'm actually going to drag this one out, bring this one into here. I'll call this one AI, and then I'm going to create myself another folder and another folder. Drag down to there, call that one PSD. This one can now be stills. So down here, I can now pick the specific stills that I want. I'm actually just going to pop back into preferences. Just going to pop back into preferences and enable all of the rules. And in here, I can add in PSB and PSD. And then in here, this is where I'm actually going to enable the stills images and then just remove it from this one. And you can see if we go down, we've got our video files, we've got our image sequences, we've got our raw files. A lot of these will be off by default, but you can go in and either enable them, or even if you enable one of their items, it will enable this bar here. Then we have different kinds of audio file, 3D assets, including substance materials, data files for those of you who are doing some interesting stuff. And then we get on to name matching. So name matching is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting. It's particularly useful for isolating a specific file or a specific set of files. It's also really useful for defining files beyond their type. And that's especially useful for stuff like audio. So there's no difference between a music, VO, or SFX waveform. They're all the same file. It's just their content has changed. So we can define them by using their name. For example, in my audio here, I could bring in and I could call this VO. And I'm actually going to now go up and I'm just going to select the basic. So it brings in all different audio formats. And then if I come back down here, I have a choice of how to organize this. Now I could just use contains and type in VO. If it contains VO, that's now going to get sorted into that specific folder. So all my audio will go into here. However, if VO is in its name anywhere, then it's going to get sorted into here. Now, contains can be useful for a quick sort, but it is the riskiest way of using these naming conventions because there is a possibility that you may have a file come in one day, which is a music file, but it's called Volcano. And it's going to see that and it's going to organize that into your VO because it's just looking for, does it contain, you can mitigate this slightly by using match case. That's going to make it less likely that it's going to get sorted, especially if you use VO in this context as all uppercase. But the safer option is actually to use either starts with or ends with and define something a bit more specific. So, for example, you could have it defined to VO hyphen, and that's much less likely to get randomly picked up, or alternatively hyphen VO for ends with. And this will allow you to sort a file picking out its specific name. This is also really useful if you've got multiple characters. So if you have a strong naming convention and they're all sort of, called character one, blah, 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 you can use exactly the same thing to sort all your character Illustrator or Photoshop files or whatever they may be into specific folders. So you're not just jumbling up all your character bits amongst each other. After that, we've got frame rate. It does what it says on the tin. This will sort stuff based on the frame rate. I'm just going to discard that. And we can mix this with other things. So let's just say, for example, in here, this doesn't make any sense, but I'm just going to stick in it's 25 frames per second. There's a danger that a lot of this stuff is 25 frames per second. And nothing else has been set on this. It is literally just using that. So the only thing that should organize anything is vids port, and then everything else should go into the unsorted. So I'll just save that and I will find example here, fire that through. And in here, so vids port, which is here, that's now brought in everything that is 25 frames per second. And everything else should be in here now. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. So for example, let's switch that one to 30. Because I'm not defining anything else, this will take comps as well as sequences, as well as anything that has the frame rate interpreted will get sorted into this because I'm not defining any other rules with these frame rates. So if I save that, and that's going into vidsland, and now I do this again, you can see now vidsland has everything that is 30 frames per second. And this is useful for if you're doing more complex sort of social media stuff, or you've just been, you're doing an out of house or something along those lines, and you've got to produce the same work or multiple pieces of work that are at different frame rates and aspect ratios, and you just want a way of keeping it all organized. You can use the frame rates along with stuff like resolution and aspect ratio in order to organize the thing. So, for example, in here, I could just make myself an extra folder here. I'll just call this extra. And this one, I'm going to say video, and then I want a frame rate, let's say 30. And then in the aspect ratio, I will go portrait. And then I'm just going to save that, and then let's fire that through. So, and then if I open this up, you'll see I'll have the one thing in here, which is portrait, 30 frames per second, and a video. So after that, we have duration. This just allows us to essentially define the duration. A lot of these really become diagnostic. I personally have my own diagnostic presets, which are not in this live install. I have my own diagnostic presets, which essentially allow me to go through and sort them into multiple different presets and just get the kind of lay of the land about the length of the videos, the sizes, are they, what their resolutions, and so on and so forth. But it can be very useful. You may have a need for these. So these are basic presets, but you can also set down here, is it at least 1 minute? Is it under 1 minute? And you can define those yourself and then mix and match them with everything else that we've already talked about above. Under that, we have pixel aspect ratio. Once again, very good for diagnostics on a new project that's been handed over to you. But also you may have a reason that you need to, once again, you might be doing out an out of house or something like that, where you do have a lot of different pixel aspects required. And this is the way that you can keep those sorted. File size. So file size, particularly diagnostics driven, but it can be very useful to set up a project, which is specifically to have a look at the weight of what you may have in your project. As quite often when you get handed over something, you may be wondering why you've got a lot of slowdown. It may be that you just have epic files all over the shop. And I'm just going to use this as an excuse to teach you a little trick that is intentionally built into Folder Fanatic, because it always bothered me having to build folder structures in this way. So you may be inclined to just click, and then if you want to make another top level folder, you can click again, and you can click again, and you can, yeah. The way that I like to do it is that you can just hammer through however many you need and then select them all and then drag them down, and that will make them all top levels for you. And this is intentional, and my apologies if this behavior bothers anyone else. So if you had a child, for example, and you wanted to keep these folders inside it, you just need to move that top one. If that is a bother for anyone, please put in a ticket and I will see about making that behavior, which you can switch on and off. But personally, I like this behavior because, as I showed you, it allows me to just quickly make a bunch of folders and then turn them all into top levels. And then I can come into here and start building their structures out. And it does work the same in here. If I select both of these and I drag them into that, they'll become the two child hierarchies of that one stacked, rather than me having to sort of click and then make one and then click and then make one. But yes, so this does the usage. I'm just going to go to used, unused here and discard that. And so if I enable used items, unused items, and used items in here, and you can include comps in this. However, a pre-comp is always used because it's a pre-comp, it's a build composition, it's inside another composition, and compositions are their definition unused because they are containers. But you can include them if you wish by ticking on this. I am actually just going to tidy this up by just enabling both of those to go into the comps. However, if you didn't, they would just go into an unsorted folder anyway. So I can save this now, and if I find used in here, there it was, you can see now that I have everything that's being used, everything that's not being, everything that's being used, everything that's not being used, and then I will have my comps. It won't touch solids. Solids, they live in the solids folder. So yeah, it won't touch anything to do with those. And once again, you can combine all of this stuff. The idea is that you can kind of make whatever you need it to be from here. So we have our proxies, essentially does what it says on the tin. It will look at a file and you can, once again, mix and match it. Does it have a proxy? Is the proxy enabled? Is the proxy disabled? Is the proxy missing? You can use these in whatever diagnostic or organizational rule base that you like. Source path matching is probably one of my favorites, and this makes some of the name matching stuff a little bit irrelevant. So you more than likely use a folder structure in your operating system for your projects. So here is a generic one I've set up. So we have the client, and then we have the particular project folder. And then in there, we have our video. And so this is sort of deliverables and animatics and so on and so forth. But we also have project. And in here we have our like assets and audio and so on. And you're going to find, you're going to throw all your VO and your VO and your SFX and your SFX and so on and so forth. And we have this defined path up here. So it's in project folder, it's in project, then it's in audio, and then it's in VO. So we can use this in source path matching. And to do that, we would just type that in. And now you could just pop in / or / whichever, it's been normalized. And also, most of the time, this is not a case-sensitive workflow, but if you are having any problem there, you can match case down there. So you could do this. You could just put in VO, or in this case, it would just be that because it's the end of a chain. But you'd be safer to put in the next part along the chain just to really lock that in. So that would be audio, VO. And you could even go back to the project name, and that way you can sort of be even more specific about organizing stuff. And this works with anything. So if you have a really strongly defined folder structure, you can use this. And the nice thing about this is that you don't have to worry about naming being too specific. And if you drop anything new, so if you've got this set up for your Illustrator file character 1, if you drop anything new into that, it's just going to go into the same organizational folder because it's going to be completely based on the path. And then last but not least, we have Diagnostics. If you want to be able to sort out missing stuff, you can. It is there for you to do so. And then we have ELS for interpretation. Unfortunately, currently, we can't tell if something actually has transparency, maybe one day. But for the time being, you can tell whether it's being interpreted as straight pre-multiplied or it's ignored. And yeah, that's pretty much it. One thing I didn't point out, which is you do have access for placeholders in both the video file and the stills. But yeah, that's essentially how we would go through and create sort of stacked rule sets. If you do have any questions or you're running into any issues, just send me through a ticket. I'm happy to get back to you ASAP. Thank you very much. Bye.